Hi, this is Brass Check, and we're recording this on August 5th, 2024. And I remember once somebody saying that the U.S. government elites have their allegiance to God, but in their case, God is guns, oil, and drugs. And obviously, guns are very important to these people. Oil is very important, and the G could also be gold. But drugs, really, how big were drugs really? And how involved was the government in drug dealing? Everybody's kind of aware of some of the work by Gary North, but there was a whole lot more. And here's something I bet very few people were aware of, and that is that the biggest military base in the United States was the main transshipment place for heroin on the East Coast during the Vietnam War. Here we go.
Atlanta had become, when you talk to the OGs from Atlanta, Atlanta had become, with its proximity to Fort Bragg.
This is the way much of this new mob's heroin arrives in this country, in planes like this one, an Air Force jet carrying military cargo. The genius of the North Carolina mob has been its ability to use the American military to move its heroin from Southeast Asia to this country.
The Fort Bragg was ground zero for that China White coming in. Again, shout out to Ray Tatum from Getting Off Zero down in Atlanta. He an OG from Atlanta. He tell me story after story about everybody knew that the bag you was gonna come across up there by Fort Bragg. That's who had it. The more than the brag is who had that good thing.
It hasn't gone away, and it never will. It is at the level now where it's infinitesimal, and we do not really have a problem on heroin or even cocaine within the U.S. Army establishment at Fort Bragg.
Yeah, that was common knowledge. Was coming into Atlanta heavy, as they call it, from the Bragg. Everybody knew that something was popping around Fort Bragg. Wow. It was so, that the streets knew long before the authorities knew.
But they so carried away with all this pure dope, it ain't screwed up like the Italians give it to the black guys.
In one recent case, a civilian connected with this mob was arrested on the runway of an airbase in uniform with a set of official travel orders and a package of heroin.
Okay, how do you like that? Nobody knows that story, and good luck finding it anywhere on Google or on YouTube. We stumbled on that in a totally different documentary that was on a completely different subject. Oh yeah, Fort Bragg, the biggest military base in the U.S., was a major transshipment point for heroin. All right, now here's one that's going to be surprising. I think most people know that the CIA had some involvement with LSD. They imported a ton of it to the U.S. They also experimented on lots of people illicitly, killing at least one person. But did you know that the company that made the LSD for the CIA, Eli Lilly, used the technology to create Prozac? Yes, that's right. Prozac was a CIA Eli Lilly creation. So here's that little bit of news that hardly anybody knows about.
The CIA was concerned that the Soviet was going to buy up the entire world's supply of LSD from Sandoz Pharmaceuticals, which they wanted for their own mind control experimentation and interrogation. So they contracted with Eli Lilly Company in 1953 and 1954 for $400,000, which was a lot of money back then, to manufacture and supply a secure quantity of LSD to them. So the first manufacturers and distributors of LSD in North America was Eli Lilly Company. LSD works on the serotonin system in the brain. The first selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor antidepressant, which works on the serotonin system, was Prozac, manufactured by Eli Lilly Company. So how they developed their expertise in brain serotonin physiology was by being the first manufacturers of LSD.
Lilly has been for a long time really committed to discovering and developing medications to help people with serious mental illnesses, certainly including depression, and of course Prozac, which is arguably the world's most widely recognized antidepressant, has been marketed since 1987 and is the drug which, as several people have noted this morning, is the first and the only antidepressant which actually has a labeled indication for the treatment of children who are depressed.
Yep, so the very same science behind all these pharmaceutical antidepressants they're giving to kids, all of whom seem to end up not every kid becomes a school shooter, but every school shooter is on antidepressant drugs, are based on the same technology of LSD. And who funded all that? The CIA. All right, now we're going to go on to one of our favorite subjects, which is the Nuremberg Code. We have a book on the subject, by the way, and another one hopefully coming out in 2025. Much expanded version. So this is the CIA investing in mind control research at McGill University up in Canada. Many of you know about it, but I thought I would run this for those that don't know or didn't know the details of it. It was pretty horrible.
Cameron at McGill, who was a direct MK Ultra contractor, who basically erased people's memories and identities with massive amounts of electric shock, and then played thousands of times over tape loops to try and build up a new personality. And he was successful in the sense that in documented cases where I have the medical records, a person has complete amnesia for age 25 back to birth, and it was all totally wiped out on contract to either the CIA or the Canadian government on purpose at McGill, in our lifetimes. 9 people sued the CIA for the experimentation done on them in McGill by Ewen Cameron under funding from the CIA, and the CIA settled out of court. Normally, when you do ECT, you push the button and there's a zzz, electricity goes through your brain, and that's it. That's one dose of ECT. In the Page-Russell technique, the button is pushed 6 times. There's 6 times the energy. So this is the equivalent of over 600 electric shock treatments delivered between May and September. And Ewen Cameron published this in mainstream leading journals, and he called it depatterning. It's totally business as usual, nothing out of the ordinary going on. And it'll say, blood pressure such and such, patient incompetent of stool and feces. Patient disoriented times 3, which means she doesn't know who she is, she doesn't know where she is, and she doesn't know what the year is because she's been depatterned. She literally couldn't control her bowels or bladder, didn't know her own name, didn't recognize her husband or her children, wiped out. Because the idea is you're trying to wipe out that old mental illness, and then after you've done the depatterning, you want to create a new personality. And the way we did that was psychic driving. Psychic driving involved playing 2 tape loops for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, either in the doctor's voice or the patient's voice, saying, you love your mother, or you're a good citizen, or whatever it might be. And there would be weeks of barbiturate and other medication-induced sleep, and sometimes he would throw in some hallucinogens. This was just a guy trying to learn how to help patients. Except it was funded by the CIA. Why is the CIA interested in depatterning? Well, when you read the Artichoke and Bluebird documents, they discuss this, they discuss that. One of the topics of discussion is the problem of disposal of subjects. And then they discuss in there, what are we going to do with these people? How are we going to get rid of them? And we can't just kill them all. But one thing we can do is wipe out their memories. So this was obviously contracted to figure out how to wipe out people's memories. And why an intelligence agency would be interested in that is extremely obvious. Ewen Cameron was at various times head of the Quebec Psychiatric Association, the Canadian Psychiatric Association, the World Psychiatric Association, of which he was one of the co-founders, and the Society for Biological Psychiatry. The Society for Biological Psychiatry held numerous meetings and conferences and published the proceedings with and without direct funding by the CIA. Ewen Cameron, who was a civilian psychiatrist, very politically involved in world psychiatry, became part of the US team that went over to Nuremberg and interrogated the Nazi doctors. While he was over there, he heard about uses of mescaline and hallucinogens in the death camps. Then he came back and did hallucinogen experiments in Montreal. So he literally learned about that from the Nazi doctors. Also, the Nuremberg trials, as we know, gave rise to the Nuremberg Code, which is basically an updating of the Hippocratic Oath, saying that subjects have to give informed consent, they have to be protected, they have to know the nature of the research, it can't be excessively harmful, and so on. But his own experiments violated all of those principles. And now what we're talking about is not the bad stuff, the mild stuff that they declassified. This is the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, and there we have it. Some of the inspiration for MK Ultra came straight from the Nazis, and one of the big players in MK Ultra, one of the many players in MK Ultra, got his inspiration direct. He was one of the people at the doctor's trial, and I guess he and the CIA liked what they saw, and they started doing similar things to what the Nazis were doing. Okay, this last bit, what is it? Let me look at my notes here. Oh, yeah, we're talking about CIA people. Let us listen to the CIA people talk directly. Alan Dulles, this fellow, I think it was Frank Bissell, who was their covert ops guy, and then some scientific miscreant who obviously worked in the MK Ultra program. And you'll get a real sense by just listening to these guys talk what kind of human beings they were or weren't. So here we go with that one.
Intelligence is nothing really other than information and knowledge. For the days of Socrates, by various methods, and even before that, mankind has been seeking knowledge of everything that influences his own life or the life of the nation to which he belongs. But the idea that it is necessarily nefarious, it's always engaged in overthrowing governments, that's false. At no time has the CIA engaged in any political activity or any intelligence activity that was not approved at the highest level. The KGB is one of the most sinister organizations that ever was organized.
Do we have an application of morality in our activities they don't?
Well, far more than they do, yes.
Could you talk on that subject?
Well, only that, as far as I know, we don't engage in assassinations and kidnappings and things of that kind. As far as I know, we never have. As far as we know, they have, and done it quite consistently. Given the caliber of the men and women I had working for me, I didn't want to ask them to do a thing that I wouldn't do.
In my position in the CIA, I had a chance to know of and remotely to observe many operations. And I will not deny that there were occasions when the Americans involved in these, as it were, out on the front, had, as people do in wartime, to undertake actions that were contrary to their moral precepts. You can't take on operations of this, covert operations, or covert for that matter, of this scope, draw narrow boundaries of policy around them, and be absolutely sure that those boundaries will never be overstepped.
I can assure you that the CIA, when I was there as director, and I'm quite sure it's the same with Mr. McCone, has given these committees full information about what it's doing, how it's spending its money, and how it operates.
We've had some statements from those who are supposed to receive this testimony that they really don't know and don't want to know what the CIA is doing.
When I appeared before them again and again, I've been stopped by members of the Congress and said, "We don't want to hear about that. We might talk in our sleep. Don't tell us this."
What in the world were they looking for with the magic mushrooms?
I think the best answer to that is that they were looking for fundamental information on compounds that would be capable of causing changes in behavior, changes in mental attitude.
Did you ever consider what would have happened if any of these substances were given to, say, unwitting people?
Oh, I don't remember having considered that specifically.
What if you, I trust perhaps you've thought about it.
Well, I haven't worried about it. I guess I must seem very, very cold-blooded about this, but I don't recall ever having been very much preoccupied with that issue.
Okay, and there you have it. A history of drugs in the U.S. government. Just to recap during the Vietnam War, one of the biggest importers of heroin to the U.S. was Fort Bragg. How that was, I mean, isn't the military supposed to be super secure? Apparently not. Then we followed that up with a little pharmaceutical history, which is that all those serotonin manipulating drugs all derive from the study of LSD, which the CIA funded. And so we've got all these kids getting mentally ill based on taking these drugs, including some of them going out and shooting people. We can thank that, not just to the pharma companies, but to the CIA itself. Then we showed the close historical links between Nazi doctors and CIA doctors. And we followed that up with letting the CIA people talk for themselves. And that probably was very eye-opening if you've never actually heard some of those famous people lie through their teeth. All right, so that's that. That's Brass Check. Hope you found this illuminating and interesting. These are some little bits of the drug history of America that are really hard to find on the internet these days. You can find all about Gary North and some other stuff like that. Gary Webb, I'm sorry, Gary Webb. But finding this other stuff really hard. All right. Thanks to all our supporters, by the way. You're the ones that make it possible for us to make the time to go through lots and lots of clips, find the good stuff, put them together, and make it all make sense.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.